Hello students, from today we will start with the subject surveying part 1. Surveying, as the name itself indicates, that we have to find out the information or data with respect to some datum surface. So we are having again two terms when you go for the reference books, surveying and leveling. So there are basic difference between the surveying and leveling. Surveying is nothing but to find out the horizontal distance with respect to by using some linear measurements, whereas leveling is nothing but to find out the vertical distances from some datum surface. So before going for in detail with the subject, let us understand what are the units are there in the surveying part 1 we are going to study. Okay, so let us start with surveying part 1. In the first part of surveying, we are having 6 units in 2 sections. So section 1 contains 3 units, section 2 contains 3 units. Okay, so let us start with the units in section number 1. First is leveling and contouring. Second unit is areas and volumes. Third unit is playing table survey. These are the 3 units in section number 1. In section number 2, the unit number 4 is theodolite. Fifth unit is theodolite traversing. And last unit is application, where we are having some minor instruments and its applications. Now, in first unit, we will understand some basic methods and what are the different leveling instruments with the component parts of each and every leveling instrument that we are going to use throughout this particular semester. In contouring, we will understand what is exactly the contouring, how contouring can be used to find out many of the applications, and what are the methods of contouring that we are going to study in unit number 1. In second unit, as you can obviously go through the areas and volumes, the title itself says that we have to find out the areas and volumes. And whatever you have studied to find out the areas and volumes, you have studied some formulas to find out the areas of rectangles, circles, squares, that we are not going to study over here. Here, we are having some irregular shapes. For example, if on the ground we need to find out the excavation of the ground, and as excavation may not be exactly in a rectangular shape or a triangular shape, it may be having any kind of a curve or it may be having any irregular shape. So to find out the area of that particular irregular shapes or to find out the volume of that particular earthwork, we require some special formulas to find out the areas and volume that we are going to study in unit number 2. Unit number 3, plane table surveying. The name says that we are having a rectangular table on which we are having some accessories and we are going to find out the plan or maps. Main aim of surveying is to prepare the maps. So by using this plane table survey instrument, we are simultaneously take the observations as well as we are going to plot those observations to plot a map or a plan. Okay. In section number 2, we are having one of the instrument, or in section number 2, from section number 2, we will start with the measurement of angles. So theodolite is one of the instruments which can be used to find out the horizontal angle, vertical angle and many other things to find out. Now, next is the through line traversing, in which we are going to study how traversing can be done, as we are having project number 2 on through line traversing, and how to close the traverse by using a Gale's table. It is again one of the interesting part to study the Gale's table. And finally, we are having the minor instruments, in which we are going to study some minor instruments, handy instruments that can be used to find out either to find out the levels, either to find out the angles. Okay, that's all for the introduction part.
In unit number 5, we'll have the more things, or we can say some practicals, or one bigger project on traversing. So that unit name is fluid light traversing. And finally, we are having some minor instruments, and we are having some applications of minor instruments. So unit number 6 is application. Okay. Now I would like to share the university course details for this particular subject, which was missing in previous lecture. This subject contains a theory paper of 70 marks. This is having a mid-semester examination marks of 30. So it will equals the 100. This subject also contains the term work marks as well as external practical. POE stands for practical oral and the term work. Here term work is of 50 marks and POE is also of, it will be 25. So total, when we add 100 plus 175, we will get a total of 170. Now theory MSc will be based on whatever you will write in university question paper and whatever you will answer in midterm test, interim test, and class test, or might be the surprise test, and so on. In term work, we are having some experiments from say experiment number 1, 2, 3, 4 up to number 7 or 8. Plus, we are having two projects, two field projects. We have to go on the field with the required instruments, required equipments, surveying equipments, and we have to spend or prepare, take the observations and prepare the map or prepare the drawings by using those data. And finally, we are having a POE. It will be an external oral, and first we have to perform the practical in front of, and external will ask some questions depending on your overall experiments, or he may ask the questions on whatever the projects that we have performed, and as per that your performance we will have the. So this is all about the curriculum, or we can say the details of marks for this particular subject. Okay, so let us go with the overview of all the units. Okay, so let us start with the overview for the first unit. The name of the first unit is leveling and contouring. Now, we have seen the details about the leveling. We have also seen the difference between surveying and leveling. There are some textbooks. There are some textbooks which are having the heading like surveying and leveling. Of course, I have to give you some reference books for this particular subject. So reference books for surveying part 1 will be, the name of the book is Surveying and Leveling. Surveying and Leveling. The author is N. N. Berserk. This is one of the finest books which includes all the details of all the units. So N. Berserk was one of the reference books. Second one is, again, name of the book will be same, Surveying and Leveling. Okay. Second, I will write only the author. Second author is Kanitkar Kulkarni. These are the two books. Again, we are having n number of maybe 3, 4, 5 books for the reference for this subject, but I prefer these two books for this semester. Coming towards the unit number 1, in first unit, leveling and contouring, these are the two parts. In leveling, what is the definition of leveling? Leveling is finding out the relative heights of the points. Those points might be above or below the surface of the earth. So in previous lecture, we have taken one example, right? What we have done, we have first of all drawn a ground surface. On that ground surface, we have kept a leveling instrument, like maybe dumpy level or 2 level. And here in front of that instrument, I have kept a leveling staff. Now, leveling staff is nothing but your measuring or observation instrument on which we are having some graduation. The length of this leveling staff starting from 3 meter, 4 meter and up to 5 meter. Staff which is available in the lab is of 4 meter height. Now, we have done one example or one exercise to find out the reduced level. I would like to repeat some new terms which we have studied in the first lecture. So I will just label the points. I will say this is as point O. I will say this is as point O2. And then we have seen the terms like reduced level. Second term is height of instrument. Then we have seen bench mark. What else we have seen? Can anybody tell me? I'll be waiting for you in the chat box. What are the other two terms which we have learned in previous lecture? So I'll be coming towards the chat box. And one more word was contours. Okay. Now I will repeat few parts how to find out the reduced level of any unknown point. Okay. So let us start with the small example. All of you, please be ready with your calculator because we required a calculator. Calculate the reduced level. Before going for direct observation on O2, what we have to do is we have to find one benchmark. What is benchmark? Benchmark is nothing but a point of known RL. Now, have you visited the railway station of Kolhapur city or any other railway station, on that railway station, if suppose that board is having some title, like in Kolhapur we are having Chhatrapati Shivaji Terminus. Below that board we are having one letter like M, S, L. Meaning is mean sea level. As we were discussing about the benchmark, let us again discuss the types of benchmark. First one is temporary benchmark. Second one is permanent benchmark. There are two types of benchmarks. First one is temporary benchmark. Second one is permanent. Now, what is the difference between temporary and permanent? You can obviously see the difference between these two words. Temporary benchmark was taken for some temporary work. Suppose, for example, let us take the example of this. What I am going to do is, I have kept the dumping level on station O1. I have kept the measuring staff on O2, and my aim is to find out the reduced level of point O2. So this is just a temporary, we can say a temporary experiment. So what I will do is, I have to take one benchmark. That benchmark will be benchmark which is taken for some temporary work or unimportant work, that is nothing but your temporary benchmark. Now what about the permanent benchmark? Now all of you have heard about the construction of dams, construction of canals, construction of bridges. For construction of all such important infrastructural projects, we have to take a fixed or permanent benchmark. How to take the permanent benchmark? Where it is written. So permanent benchmarks are marked on each and every government building. For example, railway station. For example, any government school or any permanent building, government building. There we are having a benchmark. So from that we have to do one type of leveling which is called as fly leveling, and then we have to reach up to that particular project, and then we have to start. I will explain the whole thing of how to transfer permanent benchmark to the required point. Okay. Now just keep in mind that we are having two types of benchmark. Mainly, one is temporary benchmark, which can be taken for some less important work, we can say. And second one is the permanent benchmark, which are taken to take or to start some important or highly important infrastructure projects like construction of dams, construction of bridges, construction of canals, like this. Got it? Now, coming back towards my project, coming back towards my experiment, what I have done, I have identified a temporary benchmark. So I will write this as TBM, temporary benchmark. I will write it as a temporary benchmark. I will keep the measuring staff on that TBM. Before going for the next process, let us decide the value of this temporary benchmark. As it is temporary, we can assume it as 100, 500, 1000, whatever the assume. So I will assume this as 100.00 meters. Now, first thing, when you keep the instrument on the ground, we have to do the two types of adjustments. I will again note it over here if this side of the board is visible. So I will write the adjustments. First is temporary adjustment, and second one is permanent adjustment. Whether this instrument is carrying some particular relation between some horizontal lines and some vertical lines, which are called as the fundamental lines of. There are few lines which are having some interrelations with each other. If your instrument carrying those particular fundamental relations, then we can say that your instrument is having a proper permanent adjustment. These adjustments are done from the manufacturer. These permanent adjustments cannot be done in your lab. So, whatever the relations between the fundamental lines are done, checked properly by the manufacturer, and then he will send the say customer. First one is your temporary adjustment. In temporary adjustment, this adjustment can be done at the whenever we will keep the instrument on the ground, or whenever we will use the instrument for purpose. So first thing is, when you keep the instrument, we have to go for a temporary adjustment. Okay. Now I will again explain the whole process of a temporary adjustment in the next